I'm Paige. I'm an alcoholic. Y'all are in for a real treat today. Oh boy. I'm so we love each other. I'm so pleased to introduce Carmen. Carmen and I have had the gift of working with one another for a couple of years and have known each other for many, many years. In fact, we drank together back in the day. So thank God that didn't happen too much, or we might not be here today together. Um, Carmen really walks the walk and talks the talk, and she meets consistently with me week after week after week. And of course, as this thing works, I get so much more working with Carmen than she will ever get with me. And it's so great to see y'all today. And it's just beautiful to be in a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous on a gorgeous Sunday. Be nice. It's her first time. It's the first time that she's told her story for more than 3 minutes at sunrise. Carmen.
Okay, we'll see. Thanks. I'm Carmen. I'm an alcoholic. And thank you, Paige, for that lovely introduction. It would have been better if you'd come up and been like, she's like meh. And then the bar would have been here. But I appreciate your faith in me. And it's pretty much true that it's my first time. It's definitely my first time speaking in this group and for this long, outside of when I had to do it at treatment, and I don't remember that. um I'm really grateful that you guys all came in out of the beautiful weather to sit in this meeting with me. And this is such a great opportunity for me to really take a look at my story and my life thus far. And thank you to everybody on Zoom too. And I went back and forth on how to start, where to start. You know, at one point I was basically going to get up here with a fifth step all ready for you until luckily Paige was like, no, it's not that time. And I wasn't, but that's where your mind goes, right? Sometimes, well, I've got to say all the things and be truthful and honest and not leave anything out. And what I sort of settled upon is what it was like, what happened, and what it's like now. And my story begins pretty early, like all of ours do, right? When we were born. And but some of my earliest core memories are of abuse. And before I could even probably conceptualize, rationalize what emotional abuse and mental abuse was, right? It's physical abuse and sexual abuse. And those are some early core memories for me. I still think that I led a fairly normal childhood. My father was an active drug addict and alcoholic. He was in and out of my life. It wasn't uncommon on a Sunday morning to wake up to one of his buddies passed out, having puked in our popcorn bowl the night before. And I was pretty consistently given the message that I could do better. So a normal childhood like the rest of you, right? But it's true, I think, for a lot of us. And those things, those early messages, neural pathways, the yogis call them samskaras, right? That lays the foundation for a pattern of behavior before we even know it, right? And it's a, survival mode or whatever, I don't know. We just do it. I just did it. I just lived. And I was a fairly happy kid with some anger issues on the side. And those were pointed out to me pretty consistently too. And that was one of the areas in which I could have improved was maybe not losing my temper or striking out. But I learned that that's how we deal with things is we strike out. So that's what I did. And I struck out a lot. Sometimes it was necessary. Most of the time it probably wasn't. Fast forward a little bit into high school and I found the partying crowd, and we were the best crowd. In my opinion, we got stoned at lunch, we partied on the weekends and that was what we did. I thought it was normal and it was normal because I surrounded myself with people that were doing the same thing. several of those people are dead now due to this disease, and people that were close to me that were taken by drugs and alcohol as teenagers and in their early 20s. And it's sad, but it's not surprising because of the way we lived then. I I can also say that I fell in with a good group of people. I feel like we took care of ourselves. I had a core group of girls, and all our guy friends were had already dropped out of high school, and they took good care of us. They were a little older. They could find the good drugs. We went on road trips. We went to Dead shows, and I grew up in Southern California, so that we had a lot of opportunity to go see the Dead and Jerry and other fabulous live music shows. And for whatever reason, my mother allowed that. Um, and God bless her, I'm glad she did because we lived. By the time I was 8 or 9, my dad was pretty much out of my life because he was working through his addiction and it wasn't going very well. He would come back through and he would take me to an AA meeting. And I remember a couple, I don't really remember where they were, but I'm like 11 or something. And I don't know why he wanted to take me, or I didn't. I didn't know why he wanted to take me. There weren't any other 11-year-olds there. But I came to realize, and I never asked him, I came to realize I don't think he had anywhere else to take me. I don't think, lunch was really an option for whatever reason. Maybe he didn't have money or he couldn't do lunch without drinking. I don't know. But I imagine that he also thought maybe I can show her I'm doing better and that will help somehow, some way. And it didn't. I didn't enjoy those AA meetings. I remember thinking when I was 11, 12, thank God I'm never going to need this shit. This is terrible. It's depressing. And thank God I need it now, right? My dad also was in and out of jail a fair amount for wrapping his car around a few trees and telephone poles, inebriated. And he had lost his eye when he was 18, freak lawnmower accident, probably didn't have anything to do with alcohol. And unfortunately for him, only having one eye did not make him a better drunk driver because he was terrible. And due to one of his stints in jail, he ended up missing my high school graduation. And at the time, I remember he called me morning of, woke me up. I had a phone in my room. Remember that? Like that was a thing. Yeah, I had a phone in my room senior year in high school. And he said he wasn't going to be able to make it to my high school graduation because he was in jail. And I thought, it's a bummer. But I didn't know how much to feel because he'd consistently let me down. So I didn't think it was all that different. And again, those are the things that sort of lay the groundwork for how I behaved, how I related to people as I was growing up and figuring things out. And the freedom I was allowed to go to Dead shows and go on parties was really good, but it didn't come with guidance. Those two things don't really work together. So I did a lot of figuring out on my own, and my partying lifestyle as a teenager got me in some pretty sticky situations. And the ways in which people, adults in my life, had related to me early on kind of translated forward to the way I saw myself being able to relate to other people. So, I'm drunk at a party and some guy wants to go home with me. Well, that sounds like great, right? And that's sort of how I related. That's how I built my relationships, with someone saw value in me in any way. And I thought that sounded spectacular because, again, there had been that early on message of you can do better. Right. So I thought, oh, well, they think I'm good, then I must be doing better. And that's where I need to be. And again, that laid the foundation for how I behaved, how I saw myself, how I related to people. And even with my good, hard partying friends that I loved and were great people, I always felt a little bit on the outskirts of the group. And I don't know if that was really the reality. I don't know if they looked at me and thought I was also on the outskirts. Probably not. They didn't seem to feel that way about themselves. So I guess I was the only one who felt that way. I haven't asked any of them, but I never felt like I fully belonged, fully fit in. So I always felt like I needed to do a little more, maybe be a little more fun, be a little more willing to do the crazy thing or see the party through. And I was that person. Like, I'd have one more, I'll drive. I would always drive. And I mean, it's a miracle that I'm a better drunk driver than my dad, and didn't hurt anybody as far as I know. That didn't change so much when I graduated high school and went to college, came here in the very early 90s. And I mean, what a great place to come if you're a drunk teenager, because you could go to all the bars, I mean, Janine threw me out of Charlie's a couple of times. Timmy threw me out of Charlie's a couple of times. Charlie didn't seem to care, but that was what we did, right? And I went to college. I only failed one class my first semester, and it was use and abuse of drugs. I thought it was going to be more fun. It was not. Turns out it was a science class. I didn't do so well. My friends teased me that I spent too much time in the lab. And they were correct. But by the time I was 18, right? I was somewhere in my 18th year, I got a job working in the bar. And by the time I was 19, almost 20, I was working in the bar 5 nights a week, drinking in the bar the other 2, and sleeping with my married boss. And it's not all that surprising, kind of, when you walk it back to the way I'd been related to, the way I'd learned to relate, and then later as a semi-grown up chosen to relate. And I imagine that there was some part of me inside that didn't think it was awesome. And alcohol really helped keep that person very, very quiet for a very, very long time. I thought I was just fun and always fine and willing to do whatever and tough. Definitely thought I was tough, really tough. And that was what alcohol told me. And, the other drugs that came in along the way, but booze is definitely my main drug of choice. And that was a tumultuous relationship, that relationship with my then married boss, and it went on for years. And I know some of you in the room have a little more information, but that man and I did that for about 5 years while he was still married. He gave me all kind of, bullshit story about how it was fine with his wife. They had something worked out, and I was 19, 20, 21, 22, and I believed him. And I thought, oh, okay. But that's how I spent my early 20s, was in that relationship, when it would have been maybe kind of cool to be in a relationship that was like healthy-ish. And that relationship turned out to be a pretty abusive one on all the levels. And we broke up, but I'd go back, and we'd break up. And he was my boss, and he fired me a lot. He threw me out of the bar a bunch of times. And I would go back, and we'd make up. And the people around us watched. And my friends knew what was going on, and they also knew that they couldn't tell me not to, because I wasn't going to listen. And so I just stayed. And eventually we got married and had kids. Because why not? I mean, that seemed like the next logical thing. And that would prove that it was okay. Right? He'd left his then second wife. I was the third. And I had my kids with him. And, I guess I really wanted those kids. I know I really wanted those kids, my kids. Because shortly after my son was born, I realized somehow like it was this kind of a moment of clarity. I couldn't be in this relationship anymore. We drank together, we fought hard. And I was sober during pregnancy and nursing, and I guess maybe that was enough somewhat sobriety to realize that this wasn't an okay place for me to be. I couldn't raise my daughter to think that it was okay to be treated this way, and I couldn't raise my son to think it was okay to treat another person this way. And so I took the kids and I left and I moved like 3 blocks away to the slant streets into this big old empty house. I didn't have anything but my kitchen stuff that was mine in the first place, my 2 kids, and a Rummel. We had some Rummels. And so he gave me one. I mean, that was nice of him, right? So I still have that. And we worked out a plan where he didn't pay any child support and he didn't really help with the kids. It was great. He did see them some, but often he would call me and say I needed to come and get them because he got busy. So, and that was okay. He was busy at the bar. And they were my kids and I got to raise them how I wanted. But that moment, I remember standing in that empty kitchen in that big empty house, which was kind of cool because the kids could ride their trikes around because there was no furniture. So that was kind of fun. But I remember realizing I could drink however much I wanted because there was no one there to judge or to tell me no or to have to share with. And I remember that as a pivotal moment of like, oh shit, I can do this. And at the time I was psyched. Like, this is awesome. It's hard raising kids and I'll just drink, like at a certain time of day, I can kind of muddle through bath time and bedtime as long as I can read. And then it's fine as long as I get up again in the morning. And I was tending bar out in East Missoula and that was not helping, but we had fun. And I'd also pretty much stopped eating. And I think that was another way that I could just sort of disappear or punish myself or just feel small. I don't know exactly what that was about, other than the fact that I grew up in skinny Southern California and I was never skinny enough. And that's with me today. That'll never, it's at bay. We'll see. Maybe it'll leave one day. But yeah, so I realized that actually one can live off vodka, Red Bull, and Camel Lights pretty well for a while. And peanuts. We had peanuts at the bar, and that was the only thing out at the Reno I was going to eat were those peanuts. And that was, that was my subsistence. And I was pulling it. I was doing okay. And the kids were doing okay. So I thought. But that's what I thought was okay. It's like, yeah, this is good. I've got this. And I came to realize that I didn't totally got it. And my grandmother needed me. And she lived in Southern California still and worked out a deal with my folks to go and take the kids and live with my grandmother and take care of my 96-year-old grandmother, my 2-year-old and my 4-year-old. And they would pay me some of the money, most of the money that they would have had to pay an in-home care person to take care of my grandmother. And it was a good deal for me. And it was my opportunity to get out of the bar, to get healthy, to learn to be a yoga teacher. I did yoga teacher training then. It was 16 years ago, something like that, more 17. And it was great. A 96-year-old, a 4-year-old, and a 2-year-old. I was still drinking, and I would go to the grocery store and I would unload my cart, and it would be Depends, mac and cheese, Ensure, 2 magnums of wine, and a pack of cigarettes. And I thought that was okay. I thought that was normal. And donuts. My grandmother liked donuts. She didn't eat very well at all. It was donuts and Ensure for her. But she lived to be 102, so, I might try it too. And I did that for several months and I couldn't couldn't stay in Southern California. I didn't want to be there anymore. And I was drinking, and a friend of mine actually rented the back house from my grandmother, and he would drink with me, and we would just drink. And I came back to Montana with the idea of trying to work as a teacher, trying to work as a yoga teacher, trying to really establish my life as a single mom and take care of my kids and do the right thing and be healthy. And about 8 months, 6 months after I came back, my kid's father passed away. Pretty unexpectedly at the time, but it was coming from the effects of this disease. He didn't stop drinking, and I suspect he didn't stop using drugs, even though he had told me that he did. And I didn't handle that well at all. He was supposed to take the kids for the first time ever for a weekend. And on Tuesday, he called and said Sunday had been Super Bowl, that he'd gotten food poisoning at his Super Bowl party at the bar, and he wasn't gonna be able to take the kids over the weekend. And I was like, all right, buddy. And the next morning, Wednesday morning, I was picking up my friend's kids. I was driving morning carpool that morning, and they happened to live next door to my former husband. And I made some comment, oh yeah, he's over there, thinks he's freaking dying, can't watch the kids this weekend. And Thursday, he called and said he was really sick. I went over there, called his next oldest daughter. We got the ambulance, got him to the hospital, and on Friday, he died. And I didn't take my kids to see him. I didn't even tell them he was sick. When we took him to the hospital, I thought they were going to save him. Like, that's what happens, right? You go to the hospital in an ambulance, they save you. But it's not what happens all the time. So that happened Friday. I picked up my kids from school, and I pulled over to the side of the road, and I turned around and I told them their dad had died, and that we were going to his house to meet the rest of their siblings and figure things out. And that was pretty hard. It was very hard on them. And I wish that I'd had the tools to handle it better, but I didn't. I was just doing the best I could. And I wish that had been a good wake up for me. I guess I wish I don't know, to stop drinking or to rein it in or something, but it didn't have that effect. I kept drinking. I got pretty drunk the night of his wake. My friends took care of me. But yeah, that didn't do it, for better or for worse. And I continued to drink. My current husband, we're now separated, but my current husband was in the picture. He and I had been friends for a long time, and he was also a drinker. So we'd been dating, and he'd been hanging around, and so he started hanging around more, and became more a part of the kids' lives. And at that point, my kids were getting older, and I had mom friends, and the mom friends drank. And so that's what we did. And, we kids' birthday party, go to the park, whatever, everybody at my house, it doesn't really matter. If you want an excuse to drink, you drink. And the kids got used to it. One of my closest friends, who may or may not be an active alcoholic, he's still drinking. His kids would come to him and say, hey, Dad, can we go in one beer? Because that's how they measured time. And one beer could mean, 15 minutes. It could mean an hour. One beer is really subjective unit of measurement. But that's how they grew up, and that's what they were used to. And for the most part, it went okay. My biggest shame and regret, like the crippling shame and regret that just drops me to my knees, is around that time, from the fact that I did drive with my kids in the car so many times. I was pulled over for speeding, drunk with my kids in the car. I didn't even get a DUI. I had a fucking drink in the console. But, I somehow skated that one. And that's not a war story. That's not a point of pride. It's really a huge point of shame. And for a long time, I was positive I would never say that out loud to anybody. Because I couldn't, because that would make it real. That would mean I did that. That would mean I wasn't a good mother, that I was in fact a terrible mother, because they're the most important people in my life and I'm doing that. Like, it took me the program and learning like what alcohol actually did to me and what life, the effects of life do to a person, to be able to reconcile myself with that. I mean, like everyone says, the first time you hear the promises, you're like, oh, no, that's not going to happen for me. But it does. It does, which is shocking. I was able to continue drinking that way for quite a while into my kids' teenage years. And my husband and I we were not great. Our relationship was okay. But he would drink with me, and that was good. That was what we did. That was our shared activity, was drinking and hanging out in the bars, and we enjoyed it. And a lot of the time, as my drinking got worse, he was pretty good to me. We'd wake up in the morning, and before I even opened my eyes, my first thoughts would be, God, what did I do? What did I say? How did I embarrass myself? Did I harm the kid? Like, what? And sometimes if he was feeling benevolent, he would ask me, when does your memory stop? Because I'd become a blackout drinker every night, just at home, just cheap wine, vodka, whatever. And I always thought I was managing. I thought it was fine, but I was blacking out every night. That's not fun. And sometimes he would be really pissed at me because I'd done something awful. And I had affairs, the plural, and I was caught for a few of them. Not all of them. He's not here. And so sometimes he was very kind, and sometimes he was the buffer between the kids and my drinking, which I will be eternally grateful for. And then sometimes he was, understandably pretty cruel, pretty sick of it. And once COVID hit, his job is the equivalent of seasonal, and he was out of work and he was home, and I'd been used to him traveling. And that was one of the reasons our relationship had worked as long as it had, is because he was gone a fair amount. And then he was home, and I was teaching school during COVID, and I had to teach online, and it was incredibly stressful, like everything else for everyone else, right? And I'd be up at, whatever hour, hungover, trying to figure out how I was going to teach theater online to a bunch of private school kids who didn't want to be there, and and then he would come down the stairs about 10, having his first cup of coffee, feeling good. He didn't have to work for a few months. Like, he was on vacation, and I wanted to fucking kill him. And thank goodness for alcohol. That's the only reason I didn't. But again, that was another pivotal point in my drinking career, that it was just nosedive. And that was the beginning of the solid end right there. And it was just a downward spiral, like a burning plane. And it wasn't my idea to go to treatment, but it was the right idea. It was my sister's idea, because we'd been on some family Zoom, and I guess I was like passing out. I mean, and how humiliating is that? My in-laws, I mean, it was just, and everybody kind of knew. I mean, I guess they probably really knew before then, probably, but I would tell myself they didn't. And my sister called me up, and she's done her own tour of treatment and rehabs for her adult life. Incidentally, someone should probably point out to my mother that she's clearly the problem. If it's my dad, my sister, and I are all in this program, but maybe they're telling her that now, and I doubt it. But my sister said, you should go to treatment, and I said okay, and I agreed to go for the weekend. I thought that sounded like a nice break. And she, because she knew, you know, she's like, okay, that sounds good. Just like throw a couple pairs of yoga pants in a bag and we'll just take you. And I was like, okay. And then but she's so smart. She goes, maybe bring like a couple just a little more than, you know, in case it might be cold. Right. And I was like, okay. All right. So she did all the arranging, and my husband has great insurance. They found a nice place in Northern California. It's really pretty. And as my sister dropped me off and took me to lunch first, and she said, okay, you can drink, you know, at lunch. And I was like, really? She's like, oh yeah, yeah, yeah. You know, you go to these places drunk. Like that's what you know, that's what you do. And I was like, okay, that sounds great. So I had some wine at lunch. I'd already been drinking in the morning because when I knew I was going, like all bets were off. That I was like some sort of dark rum that was in the back of the who knows? I just whatever was there, I was just drinking it. And so I drank all morning and then I drank at lunch and then she went to the bathroom. And I remember my very last drink, I ordered and I remember what I ordered and the bartender fucked it up. And I thought, how fitting. My very last drink is not even what I want. And that was it. And I really hope that it is, in fact, my last drink. It is for today. And so my sister poured me out at rehab, at treatment, and I was doing fine. And they asked if I'd been drinking. And I said, oh, I had a couple of glasses of wine at lunch, you know, like you know, dignified lady that I was. And I blew a 0.19. They're like, a couple glasses of wine. Like, I was like, yeah. Well, it must be, I don't know what's wrong with your blowing thing because that's what I had. And even then I was lying. It was right there. And I was signing my name and I was fine, you know, and the rest of the afternoon kind of sucked. And I felt incredibly hopeless and done, just kind of sitting. There's like a little, I'd love to call it a balcony. It really wasn't. It was like a little way I could open this windowish thing and sit in my room that they put me in. And I just felt terrible. Like physically, I didn't feel great, but that wasn't the worst of it. You know, I just was like, what have I become? Or what have I unbecome? You know, all of the things that I thought I was that made me good or interesting or special, like none of that's true, is how I felt at that time. And I just I didn't even know where to begin to rebuild. And I knew I had to, and I knew I wanted to because of my kids. But there are a couple times in my life where I've been that hopeless. That wasn't even one of them, but where it's not that I wanted to die. It's not that I didn't want to live. It was that it was just too damn hard, like just too damn hard to do it. And I just couldn't do it. But, you know, I stayed at treatment for longer than a weekend, stayed there for 30 whole days. And it was kind of the easiest 30 days I'd had in ever, maybe. I didn't have to, you know, you have to make your bed, a couple chores. Like it was kind of a piece of cake. They wouldn't let me exercise because of my eating disorder, anorexic tendencies. I had nothing to do. They're like, you eat and you stay away from the gym. And they wouldn't let me on my phone because I engaged in deviant behavior via my iPhone. So I was like, just sat there and read, and I read a lot. And I heard it shared in a meeting that, you know, somebody, by the time they got a sponsor, they were on the fourth step, you know? And I think, you know, Kara was my first sponsor. I think I was like, step, Kara. She's like, oh, you're not. You're on the first. Open the book and don't go any farther. Yeah. And, but coming out of treatment, I was scared. I didn't know what to do. I called up Annie because I knew her and she took me to the Sunrise, and I sat all the way down because I was too scared to move. Right. And I just didn't get up. And the Sunrise has become my home group, and it's one of the most important places in my world because I know that I won't drink for that hour. And I can't always say that. And where, you know, I mean, I might be home or somewhere with, you know, sober friends, but I still live with this fear, and I'm okay with it. I'm going to keep it, that something could happen to threaten my sobriety. And it's not a paralyzing, crippling, you know, life stopping fear anymore. But it's a little piece of fear that I'm going to hang on to, because my life is so good right now. And it's because I got sober, and because I did the steps, and because I have had two incredible sponsors who are both sitting here that I can call and that I trust, and my wonderful friends in the program. And I mean, it doesn't mean life's easy. You know, I'm going through a separation that's going to end in divorce one day. My kids are both grown and out of the house. They're in two different states. You know, I'm approaching 50, but I can look at those things now and say, yeah, I've advocated for myself in a relationship that wasn't working for the first fucking time in my life, right? I have two kids that are healthy enough and capable enough to go and do. And I feel better at this age than I did 10 years ago. So it's all a matter of perspective for me. And all of everything I've learned is what's helping me rebuild and re-become the person that I maybe always was, that I thought I was before I got just like decimated heading into treatment, right? And I like this person for the first time. I can genuinely, truly say that. I'm not hiding things. I'm not telling everybody everything either, but I think that's okay. But I'm not spending my time and energy hiding shit like I did for so long, or trying to be better, right? I know I can always be better. I'll be better. Be better in a couple hours. Be better tomorrow. But I also know now that I'm doing the best I can. And that's very comforting and very empowering. And that's because of this. So I'm very, very grateful to each and every one of you for coming and listening to me ramble on. Thank you. That's it.